Now, the book that I wanted to talk to you about today is Greenlights by Matthew McConaughey. It's a memoir. It's a book that he wrote back in 2020 where he took the last 50 years of his life and the last 35 years of his journals, poems, bumper stickers, and wild moments throughout his life and reflected on what it meant. Now, today's episode, usually what I do is when I read a book, I tell a story about the book and then I tell the lessons about it. Now, since this is a memoir and not really so much of a story, I wanted to just do the lessons part. But I think it is important that you understand the context of Matthew McConaughey, especially if you've never heard of him or don't really understand his life, which I find crazy because of who he is. Um, but what I'm going to do today is we're just going to focus on the biggest lessons that I took from this book and then share them with you. But it's important to also understand that this isn't just a memoir, as he puts it. It's about catching green lights. It's the art of living. And a green light, as he puts it, is something that continues to push you in life. It's the yeses, it's the things that we succeed in. But then there's also yellow and red lights. Yellow lights are small detours, things that didn't work out, but eventually led to a green light. And the red lights are full stops. They're death, they're failure. But as he puts it, red lights eventually turn green. And so what he does is it's kind of part philosophy, part roadmap, and part art of living. And it's 100% Matthew McConaughey. But again, like I said before, I think before we get into the lessons, you should know a little bit of context on Matthew McConaughey, his journey, his upbringing, things that are important that help these lessons stick a little bit more. Because I think what's important is when we study these people, it's important to know their lives because I can give you a lesson like be more resilient or trust your gut. And that sounds great and dandy, but it doesn't really hit unless you learn that Matthew McConaughey took a 2-year hiatus at the peak of his career, turned down multiple tens of $1 million offers, won $14.5 million, and he said no. Why? Because he trusted his gut. And in return, he won an Oscar for that, which that's one of the lessons. So I'll spare you with that. But another thing before we actually get into the context of his story, I just had to add this because I think it's so important. If you've read this book, I highly recommend that you guys also pair it with the audiobook because Matthew McConaughey reads the audiobook. And oh my God, it is the best audiobook I've ever read because Matthew McConaughey, the way that he reads it, it's so poetic. He's just a master storyteller. It's like getting a personal lecture for $20 for like 5 or 6 hours, however long it is, just from Matthew McConaughey. It's fantastic. So without further ado, let's actually get into his life, break it down a little bit, and then we'll get into the lessons. So he was born in Uvalde, Texas in 1969, the youngest of 3 boys. Now, his mom and dad were divorced twice and married thrice to each other. They had this tumultuous relationship with each other where they were both very outgoing and very crazy towards each other. But it's important because this helped, especially in the book, as he talks about, he shares the stories of his mother and his father and how they raised him, taught him his values, his morals. And that's kind of what made him into who he is today. But again, it was a chaotic upbringing. They loved each other, but they also fought a lot. And he learned a lot from that. And he talks about that in the book. Now, in 1988, Matthew McConaughey graduates high school. He was the most handsome in his class. He was, as he likes to put it, dating the hottest girl in his school and also the one across town. Like he was hitting green lights all day long. And then I think it was either his senior year or a year before he went to college, he took a year-long exchange student program in Australia. And while this was supposed to be full of beaches, surfing, beautiful women, all that type of stuff, he says it was one of the toughest but most life-changing years of his life. He met the doolies that he lived with for about, I think, 6 months out of that full year. And he said it was the worst thing that he's ever experienced. But as he likes to put it, you can't experience and appreciate summer without going through the harsh winter. And that's where he got a lot of his introspection, which led to the rest of his career. Now, in the early 90s, after his Australia student exchange program that went terribly wrong, he then goes to the University of Texas. Now, the reason that he goes is because he wanted to go to SMU for the Mustangs, right? Which I think is in Dallas. He wanted to go there, but his dad was in the oil business, and the oil business wasn't doing so good in the early 90s for him. And so he ends up going to University of Texas to be a lawyer. And he went to the University of Texas because his dad wanted him to do that. And then he became a lawyer because his dad and his family thought that was an admirable career. And so he was living a life where he wasn't really authentic to himself. And then one day he was still writing poems. He was still doing very like poetic and artsy things. And he calls his dad and he's basically like, look, dad, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I want to change to film school. And he puts it in the book, the most transformative conversation he's ever had with his father. Because instead of his father basically berating him and saying, why would you want to go to film school? Why do you want to throw away all this schooling? He just says, don't half-ass it. And he said that was the green light that he needed in order to pursue the career that eventually got him to where he is today, which again, we'll talk about in the lessons as well. But I'm just giving you the context so you kind of understand it. Now, from there, just a few years later, this is actually where he meets Don Phillips, where he stars in his first ever movie, Dazed and Confused. And this is where he delivers his iconic line, which he is so well known for. All right, all right, all right. Now, I didn't do such a great Matthew McConaughey thing, but when he does it in the book, it's absolutely amazing. This is what catapults him into the film business. This first time, he was just supposed to be literally like a background actor, but as he was on set, as he was performing, it became very evident that Matthew McConaughey was just a natural at this. And so Don Phillips put him in the movie more. He gave them kind of off-script scenes to see if they would fit, and they stuck. And his person, Wooderson, the guy in Days Confused that he played, ended up being in the movie way more than he was actually supposed to. And then he goes on to live with Don Phillips. There's a lot of stuff that happens there. And basically, I think in like the mid-late 90s, the movie that really catapulted him, which I think is so ironic, is a movie called A Time to Kill. Now, A Time to Kill, he wasn't supposed to be the main actor, which is a movie about where he's basically a lawyer, right? And the movie that made him break out in Hollywood was that of him acting as a lawyer, the same profession that he left to pursue filmmaking. And so it's really interesting how this all comes full circle. It's very ironic how that is the film that breaks him out, right? Because he left being a lawyer to go to film school, and then his breakout film was being a lawyer, which I think is absolutely amazing. He talks a lot more about it in the book. Highly recommend that you guys actually read it. And then in the early 2000s, I think from the 2001, 2009 era, he was the absolute best rom-com guy. No matter what movie you put him in, whether it was How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, Wedding Planner, Failure to Launch, whatever it was, I think I did the math on this. Over that 8-year period, he brought in box office numbers over $700 million for those movies. And then at the height of his career, he just said stop. Because around 2006 is when he met his wife. He had 3 kids within that time. And he said that the rom-com guy, the movies that he was making, was not authentic to him. And so what he literally did was said, I'm going to stop making rom-com movies, and I'm not going to take an offer until it's a movie that I feel is where I'm at in life. And so at the height of his career, when he was making millions and millions of dollars, he just said no. But the offers kept coming. He kept getting $1 million roles for a couple of months of work just to put him in another rom-com movie. And as he puts it, there was one time when he got an offer for like $5 million. He was like, nope, I'm all good. And they kept upping the price on it, eventually reaching $14.5 million just for a couple months of work to do a rom-com thing. And while the script looked better, while the story was funnier, the characters were better, the script hadn't changed. But even after 20 months of being out work, making no money at all, he still said no. And this is what set him up to what he coined in the book. He actually says he's the one that coined it subtly, is the McConaissance. And this is where he just blows out of the gate. He stars in Interstellar, Dallas Buyers Club, which won him his first and only Oscar, True Detective, Mud, all the Lincoln Lawyer, all these movies that set him up. And I think I read somewhere, or I did the math on it. There was I'm trying to remember which movies. It was when he started in Wolf of Wall Street for that iconic scene, the right, that one. And then Interstellar and another movie. And I think within a year, box office wise, the films that he was associated with brought in over $1 billion. And so he took this leap of faith where he was at the height of his career, said no for 20 months to anything that wasn't authentic to him, and then completely changed his perception, right? It was the McConaissance, the renaissance of Matthew McConaughey. And so in 2020, he releases this book, which is part memoir, part rule book, part confessional. And then he basically went to the desert. He went to a hotel room in New York. He went to all these different spots that were very memorable to him. And then he just wrote about his life, his memoir, the stories, the lessons that he learned. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to jump into the lessons that I thought stuck with me the most, that were the most important, most influential, and hopefully they're the same to you. Okay, so the first lesson that I want to get into, I coined it, stop acting. It's the point where he broke out and completely changed his life. I kind of touched on it a little bit before, but we're going to go into it a little bit more. So Matthew McConaughey was about to head off to Southern Methodist University to become a Mustang, but it just wasn't sitting right with him, right? And his dad and his older brother kept calling him. They're like, "Are you sure about SMU, little bro? Do you not want to go and be a Longhorn to University of Texas?" His dad would call him basically every week asking him, like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Eventually his brother called him and he's like, "Yeah, I'm sure. Why do you and dad keep asking me that?" Well, dad won't ever tell you, but the oil business is in bad shape. He's broke and he's trying to go from chapter 11. He is? Yep. And it'll cost him $18,000 a year if you go to SMU because it's private, but only $5,000 a year if you go to UT because it's public. Oh shit. I had no idea. Now, see, the oil boom had moved the McConaughey's from Longview to Longview back in 1979 as the oil money was drying up. Money was tight. SMU cost $18,000 a year, and UT was public, so it was a little bit cheaper because he was in state. Then his brother asks, "Have you ever been to Austin?" His brother asked. No. He said, "You're going to love it. It's your kind of town. Flip-flops at a bar, next to a cowboy, a lesbian, an Indian, and a midget tending a bar. All you got to be is yourself." And so Matthew McConaughey called his dad the next morning. He said, "Dad, I changed my mind. I want to be a Longhorn." He said, "Oh, goddamn it, little buddy. Great choice. What made you change your mind?" "Well, I just like the Longhorns more than the Mustangs." And so Matthew McConaughey never told his dad the real reason why he wanted to go to University of Texas, but he did. And so even though he was going to University of Texas, at first he was studying pre-law, right? And then he thought about it. 26 years old before he'd even get started, almost 30 before he'd ever actually do something. And he felt like the clock was ticking and it wasn't authentic to him. He wanted to do something else. And then he would always send like stories, letters, journals, all the other things, pouring his soul into the pages. And he would send it to his friend, Rob Bindler, who was a film student in NYU. And he read one of them and said, "You should really look at film school. I mean, like, you're an amazing storyteller." And Matthew McConaughey thought, like, film school? Like, no, that's European, that's indulgent, that's artsy. Like, that's not for me. But then as the weeks went on, he just felt this urge in his soul, and he's like, no. He's like, I have to go to it. And so he calls his dad up, which his dad was the most important person in his life at this point. He says, "Dad, I don't want to go to film school anymore. I don't want to go to law school anymore. I want to go to film school." His dad says, "Is that what you want to do?" he asked. "Yes, sir, Dad, it is." Silence. 5 seconds pass. "Well, don't half-ass it." He says, "Of all the things that my dad could have said, all the reactions he could have had, don't half-ass it," were the last words I expected to hear and the best words he could have ever said to me. With those words, he not only gave me the blessing and consent, he gave me his approval, his validation. It's what he said and how he said it. He not only gave me privilege, he gave me honor, freedom, and responsibility. With some formidable rocket fuel in his delivery, we made a pact that day. "Thanks, Pops." And that was it. Of all things that his dad could have said, those were the last words he expected and the best ones he could have ever had. And it wasn't just permission, it was a blessing. His dad was basically saying, "Look, you're an adult, you can make your own decisions. Run with it, go all the way. Just don't half-ass it." And at that moment, that was his, so quote unquote, green light. And a few months later, McConaughey was at a bar. Well, not really. At this point, he would go on to school. He would do hand modeling things. He would star in music videos. He would do little things here and there. And then one day when he was at a bar, one of his friends was like, "Hey, there's a guy directing a movie at the bar. You should go talk to him, see what you can get out of him. Maybe you can even star in his movie." And so he goes up to the guy and he starts drinking with him. They start talking. They get kicked out of the bar. They smoke a joint together. And somewhere in between the stories and the smoking, Don Phillips asks, "You ever acted before?" Matthew McConaughey shakes his head. "Well," Don says, Come by tomorrow. Let's see what you got." And the film was dazed and confused, and his character, David Wooderson. Now, originally he was supposed to be in about like a scene or two, really just a background character. Blink and you'll probably miss him. But then one night, Matthew McConaughey shows up when he's not even supposed to have any lines. Not like he's not even in the script at this point. And Don Phillips goes out to him and he's like, "You know what? I want to try something. I want to put you in a scene and we're going to see how it goes." And it kind of tells him the scene. He's supposed to roll up to the redhead in the film. He's basically just supposed to hit on her. Camera's rolling. Director calls action. Matthew McConaughey is kind of looking around. He's trying to figure out his man. He's trying to figure out his character. And that's when he says, "All right, all right, all right." And those three words, as he puts it, those three affirmations of what I, Wooderson, did have were the first three words I had ever said on film. A film that my character had only 3 scripted scenes in, and a film that I ended up working on for 3 weeks. And so he goes on to live with Don Phillips at this point. He basically takes a hiatus from Hollywood because when he's living with Don Phillips, he's basically like, "Look, Don, I moved out to Hollywood. Like, I need some roles. I need some acting." And Don Phillips is like, "You shut the fuck up right now." And this is another lesson we'll get into, so I won't spoil it too much. But he's like, "You shut the fuck up right now. Get out of here. Hollywood smells needy. You don't need to need it. You need to want it. Go and come back when you're ready." And so he leaves. He kind of takes a hiatus for a little bit, and then he starts getting some roles. And 3 years later, he's actually offered a part in A Time to Kill, not as the lead, but as a role of a white supremacist named Freddie Lee Cobb. Matthew McConaughey had read the script and the book, and he didn't want Cobb. He wanted Jake Brigance, a young lawyer who defended a black man for killing the men who raped his daughter. And so Matthew McConaughey shows up to the meeting in a sleeveless John Mellencamp t-shirt, lights a Marlboro, and sits down across from the director, Joel Schumacher, and makes his move. Joel says, "We think you'd be a great Freddie Lee Cobb." McConaughey nods. "Yeah, I get where he's coming from. But let me ask, who's playing Jake Brigance?" Joel pauses. "I don't know. What do you think? Who do you think should do it?" Matthew McConaughey leans back, takes a drag, exhales slowly, and says, "I think I should." Ballsy, absolutely, but also the truth, what he believed. And so Joe loves this idea, but he's like, "There's no way that you're going to get this part. You're an unknown actor, and you're not going to get a lead part." And so they kind of sideline it for a little bit. And then by some chance, I think it was Sandra Bullock just released a movie, and it did like $80 million in the box office. And so that kind of gives a little leeway to the movie because they're like, now we don't need a strong lead actor because Sandra Bullock's going to carry the film. And so still, he doesn't get the lead role. He actually wants to give it to Woody Harrelson. But the author of the book, I think John Grisham, he then says he has also acting rights. But there is a murder case in Mississippi, and it is tied to the movie Natural Born Killers, starring Woody Harrelson. And the author of A Time to Kill doesn't want his movie associated with that, and so they're like, "We can't do Woody Harrelson." And as they're getting close to start filming, they're like, "Fuck, we don't have a lead actor." And so that's when that conversation with Joel Schumacher and Matthew McConaughey comes in, and he's basically like, "Look, do you want the role? Do you want to audition for it?" And he's like, "Fuck yeah, I do." And so here's the kicker. The kid who dropped out of law school ends up playing a lawyer in the role that launches his career into stardom. Why? Because he trusted his gut, because he took his dad's advice of don't half-ass it, and because he showed up, he made the ask, and when the door was cracked open, he stepped in wide enough to take advantage of it. And so that's the first lesson I want to go over is stop acting. All right, stop acting. Start going passionately and living authentically with you, because when you do, as Matthew McConaughey puts it, you'll hit more green lights. And yes, there's going to be yellow and red detours or yellow and red green lights, but eventually they're going to turn green only when you live authentically to yourself. Now, the second lesson that I think is important is the need it, don't want it. Now, somewhere between those 3 years, from Dazed and Confused and A Time to Kill, Matthew McConaughey learned a very, very important lesson in his career, but also his life. Now, it happened just after Dazed and Confused wrapped up. Matthew McConaughey had gotten really close with the casting director, Don Phillips, the same guy who let him shoot as Wooderson. Now, Don liked the kid, believed in him, and even let him crash at his house in Hollywood, and he said he would let him help him start him up. And so Matthew McConaughey packed his bags, headed west, And at first, it was great. New town, new energy, possibility in the air. But then no roles, no auditions, and no heat was coming. His money was starting to dwindle. And as they would always, they would sit in Don Phillips' living room, eat some ice cream. And then he was basically like, hey, Don, I don't have any money left. I don't have much money. I'm not getting auditions. I'm not getting anything. And then Don snapped right then and there. You shut the fuck up. You stop talking like that right now. This town smells needy. You're done before you even get started. You hear me? You need to be cool. You need to get the fuck out of here. Get out of town. Go to Europe, anywhere. And don't come back until you're ready to not need it. Then we'll talk. And this wasn't a suggestion. This was an ultimatum. And McConaughey knew it. And so what he literally did, he took his advice. He took two other guys from Dazed and Confused, and they did a 53-day road trip around Europe where they literally traveled all around Europe on motorcycles, living freely, not caring about acting, not caring about the world. And so then he comes back, and he's living with Don Phillips again. And at this point, you can see that he wants Hollywood, but he doesn't need it anymore. He's not asking Don for auditions, for roles, or anything. And so one night, Don Phillips is sitting there eating their ice cream again, and he's like, you know what? All right, I think you're ready. We've got a meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Time to get you some auditions. And those auditions led to the roles of Angels in the Outfield. Then a string of roles that put him in the right room with the right people, including the people of Time to Kill. And now the lesson that I think is really important is that we all want things in life. But the difference is when we start to act like we need them, it puts us in a completely different headspace, whether we are aware of it or not. Whenever we start needing things, we become a little more aggressive in our demeanor, and not in a good way. We become a little more desperate, right? We don't think with our true values. And so when you truly want something and you're willing to work for it, but you don't feel like you need it, it puts you in a completely different space. And as Matthew McConaughey says, it's very similar to fishing. When you go out fishing, you don't go out to just cast your line and come back with nothing. You want to catch the fish. But if you go out fishing and you start acting aggressively, acting like you need the fish, don't let them come to you, you're not going to get any fish. If you just sit there, allow the world to work its way, act like you want it, and understand the work that it takes to want it, but not need it, that is when you'll catch more green lights. If you start acting needy, desperate, and feeling like you need this to happen right now on your time and not let the world work it out, that's when you're going to catch the red lights. And for Matthew McConaughey, he would learn this lesson once again, not just in work, but in love. And he writes in Greenlights for about how for years he was surrounded by women, flings, fun, but really nothing serious, and he wanted something deeper. He said the number one goal that he had, that he wrote back in 1992, and when he was writing this book, his number one goal was to become a father. But as he was getting into his 30s, he had never met the woman of his dreams, and so he never had children. And so he literally had a wet dream, and he talks about this. He has 3 different wet dreams that completely alter the course of his reality. And I don't know, maybe the next time you have a wet dream, take it seriously and try to figure out what the deeper meaning is behind it, because when it happens for Matthew McConaughey, there are like 3 pivotal moments, especially in the book when you read them, that completely change his life. But this wet dream that he talks about, the third one, is one where he's sitting on a porch when he's 88 years old. And then there's a caravan of black cars coming to his little ranch in Texas. There's 22 women, 88 children, 1 child for every year that he's been alive. And then he comes to the realization that the red light vision of being a lifelong bachelor had come to me in a green light wet dream, he wrote. It was a spiritual message, a sign to stop searching for her, to stop gripping so tightly, to just let it go and trust the process. And so he stopped looking. And then she came. Camilla, the woman that would later become his wife, the mother of his children, the one. Because he no longer needed her. He was finally ready for her. Or as Matthew McConaughey likes to put it, the arrow doesn't seek the target draws the arrow. And so need is scarcity, want is abundance. Need is desperate, and want is powerful. When you stop chasing and start trusting the right things, they have a way of showing up on their own time, not yours. And so never need it, want it. Now, the third one that I have for you guys is called the McConaissance. Now, you know what's really easy? When you ride momentum. And you know what's really hard? When you walk away from $14.5 million to do nothing for almost 2 years, especially when you're at the height of your career. And Matthew McConaughey did just that. And it changed absolutely everything for him. Now, the word renaissance literally means rebirth. It's a revival, a return to form, it's a rise to something new. A renaissance man is someone with range, someone who doesn't fit into a single box. When you think of Da Vinci, he painted the Mona Lisa, but he was also inventing war machines. When you think of Benjamin Franklin, he wrote essays invented bifocals, but also helped found a country. And Matthew McConaughey, he started as a shirtless rom-com guy and was known for that and was absolutely killing it by every measure. And then he wanted to show that he had range. He just needed the world to understand him and see him in a different light. And so what he did is he left. Basically, from his time when he was the rom-com guy, from The Wedding Planner to How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, McConaughey dominated the early 2000s. He was bankable, charming, good-looking. Studios knew what they were getting, and so did Matthew McConaughey. I mean, the box office success, Matthew McConaughey's romantic comedies were absolutely significant. For instance, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days in 2003 grossed over $177 million worldwide against a $50 million budget, right? Times were different then when the movies were being made. But still, that's absolutely incredible. To see a movie do that now is pretty difficult. And this was for a rom-com. But that was the problem. He had just become a father. He had just met Camilla, and life was now deeper for him. And the actors that he wanted to play, or the characters that he wanted to play, he wanted them to be just as deep. And so he says, aware that I needed more as an actor, I'd recognized the problem. Now it was time to pivot and stabilize my situation. And so we called his money manager. Aware that I needed more as an actor, I'd recognized the problem. Now it was time to pivot and stabilize my situation. I called my money manager, Blaine Lord, and asked how long could I go without working and still live the life we were accustomed to. His manager said, "You saved your money well. Do what you need to do," he said. So I called my agent Jim Toth and told him that I wanted to stop doing romantic comedies to finally find dramatic work that challenged me. And then, for 20 months, he vanished at the height of his career. But Hollywood kept calling because they didn't understand this yet. A year went by, dozens of romantic comedy offers came his way. Only romantic comedy offers came that way. And he read them out loud out of respect, and they stayed the course, stuck to the plan, and ultimately passed on them all. But just how puritanical was it about? Well, I got an offer for $5 million for 2 months of work. I read it. I passed. Then they offered $8 million. Nope. Then 10 million offers. No, thank you. Then $12.5 million for 2 months of work. Not this time, but thanks. Then $14.5 million. Let me reread it. And you know what? It was a better script. It was funnier, more dramatic, just an overall higher quality script than the first one I'd read when it was a $5 million offer. It was the same script with the same exact words on it, but it was a far more superior one than the previous ones I declined. But I still declined the offer. If I couldn't do what I wanted, I wasn't going to do what I didn't, no matter the price. And then silence finally turned into signal. He had gone from overexposed to a fresh idea. Suddenly he was a mystery again, a mystery that sells. And now Matthew McConaughey, the rom-com guy, acting as the Lincoln lawyer, was now a novel idea because he hadn't done it for 20 months. And then Killer Joe, Bernie, Mud, Magic Mike, Dallas Buyers Club, Interstellar, True Detective, all these movies. And Dallas Buyers Club was the one that he won an Oscar for. And he said, by saying no, the target drew the arrow. I was remembered by being forgotten. And so the McConaissance wasn't just a career pivot, it's a massive life lesson. And sometimes you don't get what you want until you're willing to walk away from what you don't. Now, I'm going to say that one more time because I think it's so important to understand that point. Sometimes you don't get what you want until you're willing to walk away from what you don't. Sometimes the only way to be seen differently is to disappear first. And he says, this time, with more than ever to live for, it was time to quit leaving crumbs, time to get truly selfish, and see what I could live without. Now, the fourth lesson that I want to talk to you about, this lesson actually comes from a poem that Matthew McConaughey wrote after he blew up for his time, for his role in A Time to Kill. Now, what he does, he has a lot of poems, prescriptions, and bumper stickers throughout the thing. And whenever he comes across a large lesson in life, he usually accompanies it in the book as kind of like a poem or a prescription or a note to self. And this is one of the poems that he wrote after he blew up in A Time to Kill. The first time he saw massive fame and didn't really know how to deal with it, right? He was a Southern kid from Uvalde, Texas, blue collar worker, blue collar family. And then he gets in the spotlight basically as an A-list actor. Maybe not at this time, maybe like a B-list when he was at A Time to Kill. But many people knew him. And so here's how the poem goes. I'm just going to read it as is because I think it's absolutely amazing. And I'll let you come to the conclusion of what the lesson is here. Now, the poem is called A Walkabout. Noise to signal ratio. We are more constantly bombarded by unnatural stimuli than ever before. We need to put ourselves in places of decreased sensory input so we can hear the background signals of our psychological processes. And then as the noise decreases, the signals become clearer. We can hear ourselves again and we reunite. Time alone amplifies the heart. Memory catches up, opinions form. We meet truth again and it teaches us, landing on stable feet between our reaching out and retreat, letting us know that we are not lonely in our state, just alone. Because our unconscious mind now has room to reveal itself, we see it again. It dreams, perceives, and thinks in pictures, which we can now observe. In this solitude, we then begin to think in pictures and actualize what we see. Our souls become anonymous again, and we realize we are stuck with the one person we can never get rid of, ourselves. The Socratic dialogue can be ugly, painful, lonesome, hard, guilt-ridden, and a nightmare vicious enough to need a mouthguard to gnaw at our fangs into nubs while we sweat cold in feverish panic. We are forced to confront ourselves, and this is good. We more than deserve this suffrage. We've earned it. An honest man's pillow is his peace of mind, and no matter who's in our bed each night, we sleep with ourselves. We each forgive or we get sick or tired of it. Therein lies the evolution. With nowhere to run and forced to deal with ourselves, our ugly everyday suppressions break out of the zoo and monkey around, where we find ourselves in the ring with them, deciding no more or let it slide. Whatever the verdict, we grow. It's us and us, our always and only company. We tend to ourselves and get in good graces once again. And then we return to civilization, able to better tend to our tendencies. Why? Because we took a walkabout, where he ends with this reflection. As I crossed the truth, did I find it? I don't know. I think it found me. Why? Because I put myself in a place to be found. I put myself in a place to receive it. How do we know when we cross a truth or a truth crosses us? I believe the truth is all around us at all times. The anonymous angels, the butterflies, the answers are always right there, but we don't always identify, grasp, hear, see, or access them because we're not in the right place. We have to make a plan. Now, lesson number 5, not right or wrong, but understanding. Now, in America, we want to be right. In Africa, they want to be understood. There's a difference, and it took a prostitute, a desert, and a camel race for Matthew McConaughey to figure that out. Now, after another wet dream, which I talked about, is one of the most transformational parts in his life is when Matthew McConaughey has a wet dream. So the next time you have one, pay close attention. And so, after a wet dream in the middle of nowhere, McConaughey bought a one-way ticket to Mali. No map, no itinerary, just a question in his soul and a craving to chase it. He hitchhiked for 9 hours to Mopti, met a guide named Isa, and asked if he could find the legendary bluesman Ali Farka Touré. Izzy had a boat, and that was enough. And so they sailed up the Niger River through Mopti, through Timbuktu. And one night in Timbuktu, after camel racing in the Sahara Desert, McConaughey is eating dinner with Isa and 2 of his educated friends, Ali, not the bluesman that he went to go see, and Amadou. It's quiet, warm, a breeze on the veranda, and then a woman walks in, young, attractive, and selling something. Not food or jewelry, but the business that happens after dark. And so Ali, disturbed, speaks up. This is not good. This is not the Muslim way. You do not go and sell your body. This is a disgrace. And as Ali and Amabdu are arguing back and forth of is this good, is this not, is it whatever, Matthew McConaughey chimes in. McConaughey agrees with Ali. She's young, she's healthy, she could find another job. And he jumps in with support. She should be doing something respectable. And then Ali, the very man he was agreeing with, snaps. It is not about right or wrong. It is, do you understand? And he leans back, speechless. And then Amabdu, the man he disagreed with, softens his voice and asks, do you understand that? McConaughey answers, yeah, I do. Sorry. But Amabdu is not done. He says, you better be different, not sorry. And that's the moment, the truth. McConaughey had heard something like this before, years earlier when he was in Australia, when he refused to call his host parents mom and pop. Not because it was wrong, not because it wasn't true. Now again, a different culture, a different continent, but the same exact lesson. They're not about winning arguments about right or wrong. They're trying to understand each other, and that's different. And think about that for a second. Right versus wrong is a fight. Understanding is a bridge. One divides and the other connects. McConaughey wasn't in Timbuktu to debate ethics. He was there to see, to listen, and to understand. And that, ironically, was the most American thing he could unlearn. You'd better be different, not sorry. And during my research, I stumbled across another African proverb, and I think it really connects the lesson here that I think is really important to walk away with. And it goes, the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. All right, so on to lesson number 6. And if you guys are this far, honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate it. If you're listening at this point, thank you so much. And I hope that this is providing value. And if you've made it this far, I hopefully think it is. And this one is very important. This is the Dallas Buyers Club. Now, you ever want something so bad in your life that you're willing to starve for it? I mean, not metaphorically, but literally. Matthew McConaughey dropped 50 pounds to play a man dying, but he almost killed his career trying to get the movie made. In 2007, Matthew McConaughey read the script for Dallas Buyers Club, and he knew this was it. This was my man. Ron Woodruff, a homophobic Rodeo Livin, Texas electrician diagnosed with HIV, an outlaw, a hustler, a survivor. Exactly the kind of complicated, messy human McConaughey was born to play. And he attached himself to the role that he was meant to play. That meant he had to control the script. But no director, no studio, and no one willing to back the period of a drama about AIDS starring a rom-com guy who had a six-pack. But yet he held on. Remember, this is back in 2007 when he was in his rom-com era, before he took his 2-year hiatus. And he held on to the script for 6 years until 2012. And then once finally he got the green light, once finally he started getting roles in a completely different light, when he started playing Bernie and Mud and other movies, The Lincoln Lawyer, then he was like, now it's time. I've had my McConaissance. I've completely altered my image. I think now it's time. Now, after filming Magic Mike, he started at 182 pounds. Matthew McConaughey was literally in the shape of his life to basically play, I don't know what those guys are in Vegas. So those basically male strippers. He was in phenomenal shape. But then he couldn't play Ron Woodruff because he was a skinny guy with HIV who was literally looked like he was dying. And so he went and he had to drop to 135 pounds from 182. His diet became 3 egg whites in the morning, fish and vegetables for lunch and dinner, and as much wine as he wanted. And that's it. And for weeks, 2.5 pounds were lost like that, like clockwork. Why? Because he told his director, Jean-Marc Vallée, it is my job. It's my responsibility to be Ron. But still, during this process, they still had no money for the movie, no support, and no guarantee that the film would ever be made. No studio had given them anything. No green lights. But weight just aside, McConaughey needed, but weight was just the outside. McConaughey needed the inside. So he went to Ron's sister and daughter, watched VHS tapes of the family vacation, Halloween parties, and then came the real key, Ron's diary. As we hugged goodbye, his sister asked, would you be interested in his diary? He kept one for years. If you would allow me, I'd be honored, I said. While the hours of tape gave me the insight to the man from the outside in, the diary let me know who he was from the inside out. It was my secret key into Ron Woodruff's soul. The diary told me about who Ron was on lonely nights. It was where he shared his dreams and his fears with no one but himself. And now, me. His diary is how I found him, who he was after contracting HIV, but even more important, who he was before. I remember a guy who would lie in bed on a weeknight smoking a joint, drawing doodles in a spiral notebook, writing things like, I hope I get a call back from tomorrow to go install those two JVC home speakers to Tom and Betty Wickman's house. They live across town about 42 miles away, so I figure about $8 of gas there and back, $6 for the mouse to cable speakers, the speaker wire I got to supply. That'll clear me about $24 off the $38 I'm getting. I'm changing them to install. I'm charging them to install speakers. Hot damn. I'll hit Sonic afterwards and get me a double cheeseburger and a taste of Nancy. And meanwhile, John Mark Vallée and the producers continued to cast and crew the film and scouted locations in New Orleans. They didn't ask permission. They did not flinch. Still, it does take money to make a movie, and we were running out of time on our bluff. Except we weren't bluffing, and I was still losing weight. We're shooting in New Orleans in the fall, October 1st. We declared again more loudly than anyone who asked and everyone who didn't. They needed $7 million to shoot the film. The studio that helped them only gave them $4.9 million. No one thought it would be enough, but Matthew McConaughey and Vallée declared it anyway. We are shooting in New Orleans October 1st, and that is it. People thought it was a bluff, but it wasn't. 25 days to film the movie, $4.9 million when they needed 7, no permission, no backup, just relief. Matthew McConaughey says, we did not ask permission, we did not flinch, we took the hill. And Matthew McConaughey walked onto that set as a skeleton of his former self, but the shell held a man full of fire. He bled for that role. The world saw it, and Dallas Buyers Club won 3 Oscars: Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Makeup. McConaughey was no longer the rom-com guy. He was the real damn deal. And most people in life wait for permission. They wait for the money. They wait for the perfect timing, the green light for someone else to say, yes, you can go and do that. The same way that Matthew McConaughey waited for his dad's approval to change from being a lawyer to go to film school. But in this point, Matthew McConaughey learned his lesson, and he didn't wait. He literally starved for it. He held on to that role for 6 years, and he showed up on day one, even when they didn't have funding and they didn't have support. And in doing so, he proved that you don't always need a plan, but you damn sure need some conviction. Do not flinch. And now this is the last lesson that I want to get to you guys. It's the ultimate green light. This is where Matthew McConaughey wraps up the book and starts asking himself, what is this all about? So here I am at 50 years in, looking back to look forward. What's it all about? What's my thesis, my coda, my summation, my final remarks? What have I learned? What do I know? And so Matthew McConaughey covers his entire life. My first 20 years were where I learned the value of values through discipline and deep affection. I learned respect, accountability, creativity, courage, perseverance, fairness, service, good humor, and a spirit of adventure in ways that some people might consider abusive. But I remember as tough love, and I wouldn't give back one ass whooping I ever got for the value of my values my parents impressed upon me. I thank them for that. My 20s and 30s were contradictory decades, years when I eliminated conditions and truths that were against my grain. The value in this conservative era was that I safeguarded me from fatal character debits early in life. It was a time when I was often more concerned with not running red lights than I was investing in the green lights. I did what I wanted, I learned to live, and I survived. My 40s were a much more affirming decade. Years when I started to play offense with truths I had learned and put them into action. An era where I doubled down on what fed me. The value of this liberal age was that it illuminated my most life-endorsing character assets. It was a time when I not only cruised through more green lights because I had eliminated more red and yellow ones, but a time when I created more green lights to, I hope, give my children the same opportunities to find what they love to do. Work to be great at, pursue it, and do it. Rather than cover their eyes from ugly truths, I want to cover their eyes from fictional fantasies that will handicap their ability to negotiate tomorrow's reality. I believe that they can handle it. Now, I haven't made all A's in the art of living, but I give a damn and I'll take an experienced C over an ignorant A any day. We don't live longer when we try not to die. We live longer when we're too busy living. And can we live in a way where we look forward to looking back? And now that's a wrap for Greenlights and the wild ride of Matthew McConaughey's story. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more on YouTube or X, or just search my name and I'll be there. And if you want to go deeper, subscribe to the newsletter and the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. And we've got more stories, more lessons, and more wisdom coming your way. And until next time, keep chasing those green lights.